You would think the live would be louder in the corner.
You would think.
Like bigger.
Hello. Welcome to JavaScript Marathon. We are so happy to be back with you for another full day of training sessions. My name is Tara Hampton, and I will be your host today. Rounding out the day, we'll be walking through setting up secure OAuth with AWS Lambda functions, covering common pitfalls so that you can get back to the fun parts of your projects. Our trainer today is Jesse Tomchak, Senior Software Engineer at ThisDot. Welcome, Jesse.
Yay, happy to be here.
We're so glad to have you. Thank you for joining us. If you have any questions or comments after today's session, feel free to reach out to him directly on Twitter at jtomchak, also shown down at the bottom left corner of the slide on your screen. And of course, we couldn't do this without our sponsors. Our sponsor today is ThisDot Labs, your partners in modern digital transformation, specializing in mentorship, consulting, training, and staff augmentation for enterprise organizations. You can find out more at this.labs.com or send us an email at hi@thisdot.co. Do you find keeping up with the constantly evolving technologies a struggle? Do you want to bring your team up to speed on one of the latest technologies? ThisDot Labs offers personalized training programs to suit your organizational needs, ensuring you and your company stay on the leading edge. Contact us today at hi@thisdot.co to set up your complimentary needs assessment. And if you're familiar with ThisDot at all, you may already know that we put on weekly meetups online covering various frameworks and topics. ThisDot's online meetups are an amazing opportunity for developers and enthusiasts alike to engage with the global tech community no matter where you are in the world. For the latest schedule and links to join, check them out at thisdot.co. On that note, Jesse, are you ready? I'm going to kick it over to you now.
Absolutely. Let's dive in and unwind serverless OAuth and see what this looks like. It sounds really scary, but it's not as complicated as it is once you get through some of it. So we're going to cover some of the pitfalls. We're going to do some live coding and go over this. So there we go. Like Tara said, I'm Jesse Tomchak. Work at ThisDot Labs. You can hire us, awesome people like me, and the rest of the crew to help out. Let's give a real big over picture of what OAuth is and what is different about it than, say, like basic authentication. So if you are new to OAuth or you don't know what OAuth is, let's define it first. We'll get through that, and then we're going to build an example together and actually see, like, unpick it and see how it actually works. So this is sort of our layout for today. We've got our client, which is going to be our web application or our mobile device or anything like that. And then we've got our serverless cloud stuff happening over here in AWS. And what we're going to use is a service called Cognito from AWS. It is going to be our authorization server and our user pool. So when you think about standing up a full stack application, you've usually got the front end and then the back end, and then you've got your database, and your database always has a users table, and that users table always has like a pivot table that's got all your user information and other stuff. And the first thing you have to do is like, well, I need users. I want to get, like, I have this great idea. I want to create, a website for shopping for, cat collars that are, come in a variety of colors, whatever awesome idea you might have. But then you spend like the first 4 days like setting up users, and then you're like, I've been through, like, isn't this a solved issue? Like, isn't this something that people have done before? And the truth is they have, and every new project always has this. Every time I think, oh, I want to do this thing, and I think, oh, I have to stand up like users and this and that, and we're going to try and sort of leapfrog that and get to the good part, the idea, and actually have sort of some of this interaction working right away. So in a traditional, I'm going to use air quotes, in a traditional idea of logging in, you would type in your username and password, and the website would send those to the server, and the server would hash the password, compare it to the one it has, and be like, okay, you're good. And it would make a cookie session for you, some sort of session ID or some sort of cookie, and send it back to you. And then on future requests, that cookie comes back and it says, who are you? Oh yeah, I remember you. That sort of basic auth interaction. That breaks down in a couple different ways. The idea that you're sending the user password and username the first time, and then on subsequent ones, you've always got this cookie. Well, if you've got mobile devices, that cookie doesn't work so well. Now you need an API, and now you've got a token system that goes back and forth. And the idea of OAuth is this, is that your client comes and they go to a URL and they say, hey, I want to sign in. So rather than your client handling that, the server can take over that page, can possibly, hey, Thomas, you did not miss anything. We just got started. We're talking about OAuth. Thanks for joining us. We were just going through some of the steps of the OAuth process. So the client will go to the URL and it'll say like, hey, I want to sign in. The server will then put up a credentials page that will take a username and password. And in an OAuth 2 secure, you get basically a token back to the client. So the client doesn't ever get your username and password. That happens on the service itself. We're going to see like a hosted page that we're going to sort of, Amazon has this sort of like hosted UI page that you can use, or you can build your own. The client then has a token that it passes back to the authentication service and says, hey, I've got this token. I've got this authorization. Can you give me a token to use? And that's down here where we're looking at 4, where it's like you send the credentials and then you get this sort of auth back. And then from there forward, you take this auth token and you get then you get an access token. And we're actually going to skip, we're going to do something called implicit grant as opposed to authorization grant. So up here in these steps, the real difference is this. In like the full spec of OAuth, you do an authentication grant access token, and then the client comes back to a different service endpoint, to a different URL and says, I got this access token. Can you like redeem it? And that point, we'll look at it and be like, okay, that's valid or that's not valid, and then give the client back a real authentication token. We're going to do implicit, which is to say that instead of granting an access token and then having the client go somewhere else to redeem it, we're going to handle that through the user pool and through the serverless and just grant that token directly and sort of satisfy that ourselves. There are trade-offs in this. In order to do this sort of access grant requires a little more orchestration on the client side. That's why you have things like SDKs and Passport and other things to sort of orchestrate this. For time and simplicity, we're going to sort of crunch it down and just do an implicit grant where the token grant is the same point of access. So you can sort of squish 3 and 4 down into 1 and go from there. So now that we've got an idea of OAuth, thanks for joining. Now that we've got an idea for OAuth, let's jump straight into the code. So we're going to drop that and open Awesome Sauce, and we'll get this nice and large so that everybody can see it. Maybe not too large. How's that? That looks pretty good. All right. So we're going to come in here and we're going to do serverless. Now, before we got started today, I had already set up, I'd installed serverless framework globally, and then I had run the AWS install to get that stuff going. So I've got basically access to my AWS cloud account. And if you go to the serverless framework site, there's like a 1, 2, 3 step. So we're going to do serverless, we're going to do create, and we're going to say template AWS Node.js. And what we're going to do here is it should just make us a nice directory. Boop, there, just like that. And what this has done, let's take a look at what we've got. So we've got all this new stuff over here. We're going to say we've got our serverless YAML file. and our YAML file, if you're not familiar with YAML, it's just the format for this. We'll go through. So we've got our provider. We told it AWS, and that just comes from the template. And of course, our awesome sauce is our service project name. It's always good to start with a pretty great office name. And then it gets really noisy really, really fast. So you'll see stuff like IAM roles, and you'll see variables and packages. And down here, eventually you see like functions, handler and handler hello. So the handler for serverless functions, this is going to be the function that gets invoked when we have an event happen. So it's going to take this specific function code and run it, and only it, when that endpoint is hit. So we'll look at that code, and we'll push this up and check that endpoint. But you can have more things. So like if that code needs to check a S3 asset bucket for an image, like pull all these images, or give me cat pics, or give me dog pics, or meow pics, or any of that sort of stuff. That stuff is going to be there. And then like I said, the list just keeps going. And most of this is CloudFormation, is stuff that is, some of the keywords are the same. So if you get into like AWS specific CloudFormation, the idea of like, I write this code and then it sort of stamps up everything. I think Anthony asked that it sounds really hard. Most of this code generation here in this serverless file, while it looks really sort of noisy, is set. There are a lot of examples. You don't have to do it in YAML. You can do it in JSON. One of the reasons that I prefer the JSON file is I prefer the YAML file is in the JSON with all the brackets and the quotes and stuff. It creates an extra layer of noise for me to look at. But some people I know, I've worked with people that much prefer the JSON. A lot of us are just used to reading it top to bottom because all the payloads and everything else sort of come in that. So Anthony, that's a really good point. You can switch this format into JSON. I think you can in the, not totally sure, but I think in the template that we ran down here, you can do like --JSON, I think. But you can check the docs for that. Let's look at our handler, and then we're going to push this code up and create our deployment. And then we'll start to talk about like user things. The reason I talked about the YAML file is because we're going to add our user pools and our user access in that YAML file. So here's our hello function. And you can see this is real simple. This is just the default sort of script that comes with it. You've got a status code and a body. The event comes in, and then you've got different things that will come from the API gateway. Sort of, you can think about it like if you have worked with Node or Express in the middleware, this is sort of like just the very basic part of like the very crux of the middleware. It's like I get the thing in, and then instead of calling next or respond, you're just going to return this single object. So we're going to add a couple functions in here. We're going to add one called, so because we're working in authorization, we're going to need we're going to need a couple functions. We're going to need a function for our guest, an endpoint for our guests. And we can say, hi, strangers. Hi, stranger. We'll call it hi, stranger. And then we've got, so the things we get are the events, and we're not going to use them, but we get things like the context and even a callback function. And we're going to say, so this is just going to response. And we're going to say status code is 200, and we'll say the body. And you'll notice that we're going to JSON stringify everything. Stringify, and we'll say, yeah, stranger. Let's be I before E, Let's be friends. And we can probably put, maybe we'll put a smiley face. There we go. That looks all right. So now we've got this function, and we've got, and then we can do callback, because we're going to want that to go out. Callback. There you go. Oh, invalid prettier. What's wrong with my prettier? That's just spelling. I think that looks all right. What do you think? So we put in some semicolons. That never hurts. Oh, you know what? There we go. Much better. Oh, and a I think that's everybody. Yeah. Well, let's get it out there and see if it works. So if we want to send that function, we're going to come over here, and we've got hello, and we've got our handler. And what we want to do is we're going to add another handler for our guest. So we can come up here and we can say guest. And this one's going to have a handler, and it's going to be handler dot, what did we say? Hi, strangers. Is it plural? Hi, stranger. Nope, it was singular. Like that. Now, what we want to know is when to invoke this function, right? So we've got these functions here, but like, what? How is it going to know when to do this handler? So what we need is an event. And under the events, we can have basically different triggers. We're going to have an HTTP trigger. So what we're going to say is that when there's a GET request, and that GET request is to, yeah, why not? To hi stranger, we want to invoke that specific function. And what's nice here is even in the template, we've got an example of like some of the other things. So there's like a scheduler, and there's a stream, and even a skill set. So if you're always wondering like, how would I get it to do the thing? Maybe for like, I want it to run this function when I do this other thing. The first place to check is the template and see if there's like a possibility or something. Like maybe it's already in there, like get Alexa skill. I don't even know what, there's probably a couple other in here, smart home, cloud event watch, right? So there's different ones in here. And I'm guessing the one that you probably want to do is going to be in there. So we'll do this one just from hello. All right. So we've got our we've got our handlers, this one and this one. So let's see possibly if, so we don't need our template anymore. Let's go ahead and see what this looks like. So we've written up this code, we've used the template, and now the next step is to not even wait, is to push this code up. Oh, response is spelled wrong. Did I? Thanks. All right, so now let's send it up there. I don't know why Prettier's mad at me. Module exports. Maybe it doesn't like stranger. I don't know. So once you get AWS set up, we can just do SLS, and SLS is the the CLI short key for the serverless framework. If we do deploy, it should take our serverless, should take our YAML serverless file, wrap it all up for us, push it up to, oh, I didn't even get this right. That's probably why too. Nope, still mad. Maybe we should look at the log and see why it's so mad at us. That's mad at us or something. We're going to stop that and we're going to run it again now that JSON stringify is spelled. So beyond response being spelled correctly, JSON stringify is a method, not a property. So we're going to let this wrap up. Oh, you don't think it likes the emoji? Oh, I like the emoji in there. We'll see it. We'll let this run and see if it shows up one more time. Let this sort of see if this uploads. All right, so we can see here, so it's packaging up the service, it's excluding, so it packages up, and this is doing, if you're familiar with the, like your CI/CD pipeline, this is doing like the install, the bundle, the prune, zips it up, and it's actually going to create this stuff on the back end. Now, I haven't created awesome sauce yet, but when this is done, we should have a couple URLs that we can hit, where it's created this stack for us. You can see uploading the CloudFormation to S3, there goes the Artifactory, there's the zip, there's the template. It's going to go through all this for us. When it's done, we should have a couple URLs that we can check. We should be able to check our stranger and our hello endpoints. And then we can go into AWS and I'll show you the project creation that all happens just from SLS deploy. And then what we'll do is we will start to dive into the actual sort of OAuth part of it and what that looks like. It's going up, it's going up, it's going up. Now while this is going up, I'll start talking about some of the OAuth. So we're going to use Cognito user pools, and there's two parts to Cognito. There's the user, there they go. There's the user pool and the user identity. So let's check these two out. And do I want to open? Sure. Let's take a look. Let's see if that worked. Internal error. Oh, let's see if dev hello works. Maybe it's not done yet. Oh, that one's even, oh, probably want to finish off the, no, internal error. All right, let's see what's going on. So if we go to our AWS console, we get to do some live debugging here. Maybe it does. Maybe it really doesn't like my emoji. And we can go to AWS Manage. Oh, let's log in. We'll see what it made for us. So we've got our Lambda functions. This is where those are going to go. So if you're not familiar, this is the AWS console, console.aws. We'll make this a little bigger so we can see. And you're going to see probably a myriad of ones. There's our awesome sauce guess, awesome sauce hello. Didn't we have one called awesome sauce? What did we call that? Didn't we call that something? Oh, that's right. Our guess, we called it guess, and we said /hi stranger. So yeah, it's hi stranger. All right. Well, let's take a look. I feel like guess is a nicer word than stranger. So just by doing the SLS deploy, this guy showed up. We've got our awesome sauce dev guess, and that's the handler. And underneath, we can add multiple functions to it. So let's see. Let's just test it right here. This should just run. Go to serverless one. Response, export, async. So let's test that out. And we can actually just run it right from here. We can say, actions. I just want to run you. Yes, there it is. No results yet. All right. Let's give it a second. Let's try our hello function. Maybe we'll just copy it. That's our presentation. Internal server error. Let's see if we got any errors from the awesome sauce. I didn't get any errors from the awesome sauce. So if we look, it's got awesome sauce keys, endpoints, functions, layers, run serverless command to set up stop monitoring. It says it's up there, says it's good to go. Let's do this. Let's pull this guy out, save it. We'll take one step. Man, that really just does not like that. Then we'll take Anthony's. Oh, you know what? Maybe Prettier just doesn't know about my YAML file yet. Let's try that. Now, I will tell you, Anthony's right. In the YAML file, it can be very persnickety. And I mean that with all the love in my heart. If we've got too many spaces or not enough spaces or any of those things in our YAML file, it's just going to throw up on us. And it may not even tell us why. It may just like shrug its shoulders and be like, I don't know, sorry. Too bad, so sad. And you have to sort of like, it's real rough to sort. It can be really rough to debug it. Automatic formatting on save helps. Those sorts of other things go a long way to help it out. So we'll let this stack update, and then we will give it a shot, and we'll see. I pulled out another function, so we've just got our hello. There we go. We'll throw that up there. Hello. Wow, seriously? Let's throw it in Postman and see what Postman has to think about that. There's always one of those things that's like, internal server error. Interesting. Pythonic. Yeah. Thomas, I had an experience with Python a while ago. This was probably 10 years ago. This was before formatters and prettier stuff. Well, let's do this. Since we've got, let's do this. Let's throw out this file and let's redo. Let's throw out a handler, delete permanently. Let's throw that out. And what we can do is let's just start the template over again and see what it has to say for itself. So we're not going to change it or anything, and we're just going to upload as is. So I imagine I probably fat fingered something. which is probably why Prettier was mad, which is probably why there's an internal error. And there are logs we can go in and look. It's probably not the most entertaining piece to watch me debug logs, although it could be really helpful. So let's see. So, oh yeah, invalid file detection. I'm guessing Prettier just doesn't know about my server, about this file yet. Or just doesn't like awesome sauce because it's not spelled right. So without changing anything, this is just the default. We'll let that go up there, and then we're going to add our other function to it. And while that's uploading, here's what we're going to do. We're going to come up here to provider. And I have got, so we're going to, these are all a lot of defaults. So the stage, dev, staging, prod, and then we're going to want node, refuse connection, and then self-service. So these are just, Prettier, some standard ones. Run the serverless command, good. So that went up there. We've got one function, but you also notice, so this happens when you first do the template dev, and I'm kind of glad this came up, is when you do serverless deploy once, you don't have any events. So there isn't anything to trigger this function. Many times have I created something and gone through and wondered, why in the world is there not anything on the other end of this? That's really strange. Because there's no event to kick it off. So we're going to drop our hi guest in there, and we'll just do hi everyone. We'll maybe we want to be nicer than that. So, and I'm going to actually grab these from my template so that we don't have to endure the spelling atrocity that is, again, response is spelled correctly, and even stringify is spelled correctly. Hi guess. So let's kick that up. SLS deploy, and we will let that run. And while that's running, I'm actually going to grab this other one, this other function that we're actually trying to get to. And then while this uploads, I'm going to explain what this is. So here's a function called hi users. It returns a 200. It's got access headers here because it's going to eventually go through, once we create some pools, some Cognito user pools, it's going to have to go through this and get access. And then, awesome, wow, even the template's got bad spelling in it. And then we are going to hopefully put this user message behind some authentication. And then I want to put the event in here as a stringify so that you can see like all the things that are possible that are coming down from this. So this will finish, we'll check it, and then what we're going to do is go into serverless and actually add in, there we go. We got some endpoints. This can be a GET request. We'll just copy it and jump over to our nope, still airing out. Well, isn't that something? Let's see what Postman looks like. Nope, no Postman there either, huh? All right. Oh, maybe we'll put the gateway in there. All right. So we're going to drop in some additional resources and see if that sort of kickstarts our functions. Actually, before we do that, let's go over and we already had this up. So if we go to services and we go to Lambda functions, this would be a good sort of debug into the Lambda function. So let's find out what is sort of tripping this up. we've got our awesome sauce Jess, check. 2 minutes ago, that's us. Permissions and monitoring. We've got our API gateway. It's got a REST endpoint here, authorization none, resource path. All right, so this looks pretty much spot on. So if we open this, internal server error. Let's look at our applications, layers. We'll go down, we'll look at our, let's see if we can dig out the reason that this is not. Yep, so these are all the items. You can see this was made about 14 minutes ago. These were all the items that were created just by the simple we're still digging to figure out what it looks like. Everything's up. No API requested. Yeah, you're not wrong, Thomas. We're looking for the there we go. Hi everyone, body, starting, path. So now what we've done, you can see we're at the gateway. We're coming all the way in from the API to the dev awesome sauce to the resources to the endpoint, and then you get Lambda function status 200 due to customer function error, syntax error in package JSON. Syntax error in package JSON. Oh goodness gracious. No. Oh man, that is something else. So let's put this up, and then so before we got started today, I have this little front end. I have just this index HTML page that is just sort of allow us to orchestrate and sort of call the hosted UI front end for our serverless function. And it's just an index page in this folder. And I'd forgotten to quote over here. And part of that, you wouldn't know until you get all the way over here and you get all the way through the API gateway and you get all the way to the function. And then down here it says, Lambda execution failed due to customer function error, syntax error, parsing package.json, unexpected token at position 120. That is a new one. I usually don't manually play around with this, but I just pasted that in there and was missing one single quote. So let's run that and see if that gets us up and running. Yeah, so you'll get like a 502 or a 500, Thomas, that's just like server error, like shrug shoulders. And you're just like, what? Seriously? At which point I will usually jump over to, okay, you ready? Yay! So now that we've got that in there, now that we've got it working, I hope that was helpful for debugging. We've got our hi guests, we've got that one in there, and I added our hi users, which gives us this in the event. So let's add the registered users to our serverless. Let's get it working, and then we're going to put auth on top of that, okay? So we'll come over here, and I'm going to drop this. That's our users. Now, if you're wondering where I got guests from, these are just arbitrary sort of delineators. So for here, I have got one just called registered only, which takes a handler, an event, and then has its own pathway. And these are just separate ways for you to sort of group these things together. So we're going to send that up. So we've got hi, awesome users, and hi, everyone. And while that's uploading, we're going to come down here to resources. And this is where we can add different sort of attributes or different AWS services. So if you need Cognito, or you need a specific S3 bucket to store images in, you can always go to the AWS console and like create that, but that's a one-off creation. When you move from like dev, which we're building it now, or then you maybe move to staging or production, you're going to have to go create that bucket again. And what happens to me so often is that I will create the bucket once for dev, and then when you get over to staging, you're like, everything's failing. That's really weird. Oh, because you remember between step 3 and step 4, you have to manually create the bucket. This idea of code as infrastructure is sort of the idea to help you not do that, to not fail through that. So we're going to give it 2 resources, and then I'm going to walk you through this. So we're over here under resources. You'll see it's in lowercase, and then the resources we're going to put in here. We're going to put 2 of them in. We're going to put a Cognito user pool, which we will call, instead of OAuth serverless user pool, we will call awesome sauce user pool. And what we're telling it is that the type here is AWS Cognito user pool. And then we're going to go to the portal and check out when this is made. And user attributes, just the email, and then policy passwords, right? These are all the options that you would click through when you create this manually. Password policy length, minimum, requires numbers. We can make that false. Requires an uppercase, true. So we need the user pool, and then we need a pool client. And we will call this awesome client. And this is going to refer to, so the user pool is basically our user table, our creation of users that you would usually do in a database table. The pool client is where it's Cognito's basically, we're going to reference that so that it knows, hey, our user pool ID is coming from this pool that we created up here. So let's check our hi awesome users. Let's make sure that that works. And then we're going to create our pools, and we'll go over and check it out. Now that we've got our spelling all correct. Boom. This is good. You can see this is all the stuff. Where's my JSON formatting? Oh, that's sad. This is all the input source. So you want to know what URL it is, what path, what method, all the accept headers, the host, the resource path, the account ID, right? The staging, the domain prefix. There is a lot of information in that event for you to sort. Let's save that. Oop. And let's deploy that again. There's a lot of information in that event for you to sort of grep from. So if we look, if we throw this in Postman, we get a much nicer view of it. There it goes. Bigger. Too big. But you can see it's got like all the headers and stuff like that. You've got the Postman token coming back, multiple values, even stuff like Amazon's sort of ID tracing, port forwarding, query string. So if you need to pull query string parameters out, request context, this is where we'll start to see like identity and stuff like that to come into play. Domain and API, nothing in the body end is encoded, that sort of stuff. Anthony, the debugging tool that I use to find that error is up here in the application gateway. So if the Lambdas, when you do serverless, is always going to post and then sit behind this gateway. So I basically started with the API, the application that it created itself, right? So we did dev awesome sauce, and you see I've got, this is the project that I built to make sure that all of this worked. So we've got dev awesome sauce, and then once you come in, we should see our other ones. So now you see we've got our high awesome users, which is authorization none so far, and then we've got hi everyone. So these are our resources. So I was able to come into here to this get request and click on it and actually run this test. So you can see here's the sort of dance that it's doing from client, which is us, all the way back and all the way forward. So if we're just doing this in the browser, we're not going to see a lot of it. But here, if we've got test, we can kick this off and just run this little guy. So we can even put in parameters, we can put in headers, variables, things like that, and we can hit test. So Amazon API Gateway, Anthony, is where I started that journey. And then you get sort of, so now we get like an actual response body, and we get status code and latency and that sort of stuff. And then we get all the sort of, here's what we're after, right? Is successful completion of execution. That's when we know it's working. All right, so we pushed that stuff up there. So now we should have a user and client pool to work with. So now I'm actually glad we're in the console. So now we can just jump over to Cognito as a service. Give that a second to load up. Yeah, absolutely, Anthony. And that is like debugging these Lambda functions is probably, it's a toss up between the YAML and the debugging a service, a Lambda function somewhere else. Those two things can be a huge, huge struggle. The serverless framework does have a way to run these locally. You can sort of run them in mock, and it will sort of generate and help you sort of debug those yourself, which may have helped if we had set that up and you have to add a couple SDK things and then install a couple more global things from the server framework. But it is helpful. Or you can just run to the console and sort of read between the tea leaves. So the Cognito we talked about, we've got managed user pools. These are our groups of users that you would use like a users table. Now, manage identity pools, I don't really like this language because I always have to remember the difference, and I actually had to write down 2 notes to remind me which is which. These are our users, sign in, sign out, reset password, that sort of stuff. Manage identity pools is to give those users access to other parts of our AWS infrastructure. So if they need access to like an S3 bucket for images or administrative things to, process those things, that sort of stuff, that is where like they need to get to another part of the application or another section. That's what you would use identities for. Here's our awesome sauce user pool that we just set up, and you can see so far estimated users none. But all of this, so like all of these fields, you can start to see. I think Thomas had said something about looking at the YAML and like, yeah, it's kind of messy. But once you are looking at the properties, minimum password, policy, only uppercase, allow user to sign up, right? If you remember, we were just looking at these over here, minimum password length, uppercase and lowercase. And what you'll find with these YAML files is once you find an example and pull, like I'll usually just go to the docs and pull like the default and then tweak it the way I want it. Writing this stuff off the top of your head from memory sounds like an awful use of time. So what we want to do is we want to come down to at clients, and part of at client, here it is, at client settings. So we want to enable these, and we're going to do implicit grant, and we're going to put in these callback URLs, and I'll talk about these in just a sec. We're going to do localhost 3000, and we can do localhost 3000. Allow scopes. Let's do all the scopes. Now, what I'm doing here is I'm saying, in order to provide OAuth 2 support, my app client, the web page, the mobile device, is going to call this service with the URL string and say like, hey, I want to authorize this user to sign in. Once that service, once the OAuth 2 service handles that authentication, like right, the username puts in their password, we need the server to like do something else. It needs to send the user back where it came from, right? So if most of us are familiar with this. If you click like the sign in with Facebook button, it goes to Facebook and you either hit, yeah, I'm already signed in, or you put in your username and password. And then where do you end up going? You end up coming back to Super Notes or Meow Cat Callers or wherever you were originally started. That's where you come back to. When it sends you back, it sends a token with it too. And that's what we were talking about in the very beginning, is the grant or the implicit grant. So what we're saying with implicit grant is when you send you back to the client, I'm just going to give you the access token. Like you're all good here. Right? 2 thumbs up, you're set. As opposed to the authorization code grant, which is like an access key that the client then goes somewhere else and redeems for that token. It's a little bit more orchestration, and when you can't spell your npm startup scripts, that's where we end up. So we're going to save that, and we're going to come down to domain name, and this is basically going to be our OAuth service. So we're going to say, let's do awesome sauce. Let's make sure awesome sauce is available. Oh, good. I'd hate for that not to be available. And then if we come back up to UI client settings, you'll notice there's a launch hosted UI. I'm actually going to make a user first. I'm going to come up here and I'm going to say, we're going to create a user, and we're going to say, should it just be me? Let's just do me. So send an invitation. No. Temporary password. Password. Mark phone number is verified. Mark email is verified. That should work. All right. Oh. Invalid parameter exception. Oh, that's right. This has to be because we said the username would be the same as, what do you want now? Email should be empty or the same. Oh. It's getting, there we go. All right. So we've got our user. Hope we remember the password. So let's come down and we're going to see under app client settings. Let's launch this hosted UI and let's see where it takes us. So you'll notice the URL is awesomesauce.auth.us east blah 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 incognito. This is the auth URL, and what we've done, AWS will set this up for you. They'll set up a hosted UI. Like, you don't have to use this, but you can. And hopefully 1, 2, 3. Now, when I hit sign in, what it should do, if I got the username and password right, is the OAuth service from Incognito will be like, yep, that user pool is correct. It will kick, and then it should hit our callback. So this should go to localhost 3000 if I got the password right. Oh, I need to enter a new password because I put in, okay, well, let's put in a new password then. Four, 5, 6. And you'll notice we haven't written any of this front-end UI code. Oh, man. We haven't written any database tables. We've already been able to create a user. We invited a user, and now they were able to come back. And then here's the best part is localhost 3000 token ID, blah, 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 blah. So I'm going to I'm going to copy this, and let's go back to our application. I'm just going to drop it in there because I want to really drive this point home about how does this not, that's this kind of project doesn't have a README file. So the type is a bearer token, right? So here's this whole token, but you'll notice like here's this callback, localhost 3000 with an ID token. So from our application, we've already got a login screen. The user's already been able to reset their password, and they're going to kick back to whatever sort of URL and functionality we were at before. So with very little on our part, we've already gotten quite a bit done. Now, if we come back in here, we set up these two, we set up the pool, we set up the user pool, and then we set up the pool client. So now we've got these two parts, but now comes the last, like the last little bit where we want to secure this endpoint. And we're going to do that with a last little bit of resource. So we've got, we'll change this in just a sec. But if we come into resources, we've got our Cognito user pool, we've got our pool client. What we want now is the authorization step is going to happen on the API gateway, not on each individual function. So what we want is for these to line up. There we go. Oh, would you look at that? Prettier's not even mad at us anymore. So we're going to add an API gateway authorizer. And this depends on the API gateway REST API, which is a specific type. We're going to use the Cognito authorizer. And then it's going to reference the Cognito user pool in the header as an authorization header. And then the output is the user pool and dev. So what this does is this creates a auth check at the API gateway for us using specifically the user pools that we just set up as a token header. So authorization header bearer token, just a standard JWT token is what needs to be provided for that. So now we can come up here, and this is one of the reasons why we section these off as registered only and guess. So now we want to basically tell this function that it is for authorization, that it needs to be authorized. So we've got our method, we've got get, and we're going to add an authorizer for user pools that's going to refer to, it's going to use the ID from the API gateway. And then these are stuff that you have to sort of tease out of the tea leaves often is CORS issues, right? Where the origin specifically, and then we're going to put these headers on it, and we can change this to true. So let's save that file. Let's get this deployed. And then we've got our gateway working. So once this is deployed, we will turn on our mock front end, our front end client. And the only thing the front end is going to do is basically just go to the URL. It's going to basically just run the hosted UI. It's going to go to the hosted UI URL we tell it to, and then we're going to sign in, and it's going to run at port 3000. So instead of undefined, oh, someone's got to save their, hey man, someone's got to save their file. Instead of running undefined, it should kick us back and show us, you know, instead of just this, it should show us our token. So let's go in here. We're going to want this URL. And even better, you'll notice that this service that's running separately still knows I'm signed in through a session cookie. So when I come back, it just says sign in through the username that you're already in there. And yeah, sure. Absolutely. So we'll jump back to our project. We save that file. We'll deploy that. You don't need to worry too much about this is basically the authentication URL that we set up for this web page. I keep trying to use air quotes for this web page. So we'll get this deployed, and then we will start up the service, and let's see if everything worked. And then we would have covered a whole lot of stuff in a real short amount of time, including some Lambda debugging, which is everyone's favorite. So as soon as, let's open another term. We'll let this deploy. And then if you've got any questions, I know we blew through a whole lot in real short amount of time. We even threw in some trigger debugging there at the end. But if you've got questions, throw them in the chat. Let me know. I'll keep an eye on it. We'll get this up and running, and I'll answer your questions, and then we'll call it a day. But I hope this has shown sort of the idea and maybe even the power behind serverless. If you thought, what would I use serverless for? There's a lot of possibilities. You know, we've gotten a lot out of the code and we haven't done anything. So you'll notice that this just says not authenticated, right? This can be our application. It knows it's not authenticated. There's no ID token or anything like that present. So if we click authenticated, just like our hosted URL, it's going to take us over here. We put that in there. And this is hosted by AWS. Now, do you have to use this with Cognito? Nope, you can build your own. There's a JS SDK, a React SDK, a React Native wrapper, AWS SDK, tons of that stuff. Now, here's the fun. Here's where I hope everything works, right? We're going to find out. Is when I click sign in as J Tomchak at Mac, it should kick me back, and there's my token. So now I've got a token, and I can take this token, and let's go back into our Postman. We've got hi, awesome users. Make sure that we can send that. And then do you remember we had, what did we call our guest URL? Hi, awesome users. Oh, is that a different URL? Doesn't seem to be very gated. Hi, awesome users. Let's check. Oh, did it fail? An error occurred. Awesome sauce. Dev export with Cognito. Oh, dev is already in use. So let's come down here. Basically what it says is, hey dude, the awesome sauce pool name user, this awesome sauce pool name user. Awesome sauce Cognito. You already used that export name. You remember when you did the project earlier so that you knew that it would work? Yeah, you already used that name. So don't use that name again. So let's push this up, and then we'll wrap up. If you guys have any questions, I know we're running a few minutes long. Will I deploy this to prod? Not today, Anthony, I won't, but you can. Ideally, what you would do is come up here and add, when I do send these things off to prod, what I usually do is, let's come up here a little ways, is I will add an additional stage called prod, and then I will have two. And then when I do I will actually send, I won't run this locally on my machine. I will send that to AWS Cloud Build, which is like a CI/CD pipeline. And so basically I add another stage called prod. And when I make a commit or PR to master. Code builder then gets pinged and says, oh, there's new stuff in master. It will run this exact process, but for the prod stage, and everything gets set up. You'll notice if we jump over and look at the AWS, you'll notice that this application actually ends with -dev, and the application is only called Awesome Sauce. So this would say Awesome Sauce -prod for that production setup. So it'll be basically the exact same environment, but for production. And I don't ever try to run production runs locally. I have like the cloud builder, whether it's Circle CI or GitHub Actions or someone else, some other entity run production builds for me, mostly so that they're more coherent. It's like if you run a production build on your laptop and I run a production build on my laptop, like hopefully they're the same. That way, because in the past, I don't know how many times I've deployed and been like, oh, I'm on the wrong branch, and or a myriad of other problems. So, Anthony, to answer your question, I'm not going to push it to production today, but this is exactly how I would add an additional stage. And then what's happening with the CloudFormation is those Cognito user stacks pool, you have one for dev and one for production. So you're not mixing users either. And that's sort of the really nice part. Like, I know it looks, when we get down into, especially into these resources, like, what is all this? Like Cognito user pool, type properties, MAF, like this is multi-factor authentication configuration, pool name, attribute. Like once you sort of get it set up for dev, then you just add prod and replicate, which becomes like the really sort of nice part of it. So that deployed without problems. We should get, there it is. So we get unauthorized now, which is perfect. We have gated this endpoint for Awesome Sauce users for just that. Now, if you remember, we got a key. Let's see if our key is still there. It is. So we signed in, we got a key. Let's come into Postman and see if we can bearer token. We come in here and clean that up and put it in our new bearer token. All right, so we've got our bearer token. We've put it in the header. We've gated it. We've gotten the 4, and you can see here's a 401 unauthorized. All right, you're very welcome, Anthony. Here's the big drum roll. There it is. So we've signed in, we've pulled the token back, and now as a client, we have a gated endpoint using OAuth through serverless after a failure to spell correctly. And then we've got all sorts of good stuff in here. We've got our Postman. We can come down here. Here's our authorization token. If we keep coming down, I'm wondering how much more information the authorizer, email verified, token use ID, auth time, right? This is all the good stuff. There's our email address for the user that comes in. So we could use that email. We could even use the token ID to pull up more. We've got the stage. So you would see like prod in here, request IDs and keys, domains, and everything else. So we are all set. We have gone through, hopefully, this should have just called a crash course to serverless OAuth. We've covered sort of holistically what the OAuth looks like. We've covered how to set up a serverless from scratch, how to debug your JSON, JSON package.json file. We let sort of AWS and Cognito sort of orchestrate the rest of this, do the credentials, pass back the token, and then we use that token to like go get proper stuff. So, oh yeah, we're gonna finish off with air horns. Thank you so much, Brittany, and everyone else who watched. Like I said, if you need consulting or awesome people to help you with your project, you should check out this.co. My name is Jesse Tomchak. Thank you all for slogging through OAuth and serverless with me. Have a wonderful afternoon, and I will see you next time. Absolutely, Anthony. Thank you so much for sticking with me. I hope that the debugging proves extra valuable for you. Check out the docs and hit me up on Twitter, JTomchak, if you've got questions or you struggle too. We'll struggle through it together. All right. Thanks, everybody.